I was only 22 when my mother passed away. A cold, early spring morning stole her away from me. The world didn't stop spinning for anyone else, but it did for me. Her funeral was a blur of faces I didn't recognize, and distant relatives who whispered behind my back about what should happen next. But in the end, it was only my stepfather, Roger, and my step-siblings, Lily and Ben, who stayed by my side. Or at least, that's how it seemed. Roger had promised my mom he'd take care of me. "I'm your father now, Camilla," he'd say, his heavy hand on my shoulder. I'd nod, trying to believe it. But deep down, I knew better. They were just words. When my mother died, they weren't words he even bothered to back up. My mom's absence echoed in the silence of that house. I was trying to piece together a life, working 2 jobs, barely surviving, hoping my family would fill the void, would offer me some comfort. But instead, they treated me like an outsider. It was as if my mom had never existed. They barely acknowledged my pain. Roger, Lily, and Ben, they were the new family now. I wasn't even a guest. I was an inconvenience. When they spoke to me, it was with thinly veiled disdain. I didn't belong, and they reminded me of it daily. It hurt more than I let on, but I never said a word. I just kept working, trying to survive in a house that didn't feel like home anymore. That was until the day everything changed. I came home that day, expecting the usual quiet. Maybe a cold dinner left on the counter. Maybe nothing at all. But when I turned the corner of the driveway, I froze. My bags were sitting on the porch, packed, zipped up, neatly arranged like I was the one who had decided to leave. Lily was standing in the doorway, a smug grin stretched across her face. "This house belongs to our dad now," she said, eyes glinting with something dark. "Leave your key." My heart dropped to my stomach. I stood there, dumbfounded. I don't know what I expected her to say, but it wasn't this. She didn't even look like she cared. And Roger? He was standing behind her, his face as impassive as a stone. The man who had promised my mother. The man who had told me I could trust him. He didn't speak. Not a word. Not even a hint of apology. He just stood there, watching it all unfold like it was none of his business. I could feel the air getting thicker, suffocating me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout that I was family too, that I was supposed to be taken care of. But instead, I just stood there, holding my breath. I didn't say anything. I didn't argue. I just reached into my pocket, pulled out the key, and let it fall into her outstretched palm. And then, I walked away. No words, no fight. I didn't need to. They had already shown me what they thought of me, but they didn't know yet. They didn't know the half of it. The call came a week later, in the middle of my shift at the diner. I was balancing 2 coffee pots in one hand and trying to jot down an order with the other when the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but I picked it up anyway. The voice on the other end was calm, too calm. "Miss Jones? This is Hannah from the mortgage company. We're just following up on the missed payment for this month. It looks like your tenants haven't paid." My heart stumbled in my chest. "Tenants?" I asked, breath catching. "Yes. According to our records, the house is under your name. The payment has been overdue for a few weeks now. We've sent several notices, but we're still waiting for a resolution." I felt the room tilt. I couldn't process what she was saying. The house? My house? "Excuse me?" I croaked. "What did you say? It's under my name." "According to the deed transfer, yes, Miss Jones. The house was legally transferred to you last month. It's in your name now." I stood frozen, the phone pressed to my ear. The weight of her words sank deep into my bones. My mother had done what? She'd transferred the deed? To me? The world felt like it was spinning in slow motion as I hung up. I could still hear the hum of the diner around me, but it was distant. I couldn't focus. My hands were shaking. I had been wronged all along. They weren't the ones who had control. I did. I sat in my small apartment that night, the weight of everything pressing down on me. My head throbbed, and my hands trembled as I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the papers the mortgage company had sent. My mother had known what she was doing. She hadn't just left me a house. She'd left me power, an inheritance wrapped in the kind of silence that spoke louder
than any words ever could. But what now?
I had no idea how to handle this. I wasn't prepared for a fight. I wasn't prepared for any of this. My mind raced with the implications. Roger, Lily, Ben. What would they do when they found out? They thought I was powerless, a girl who had lost everything. But they hadn't known what my mother had kept hidden away. She'd protected me, even from beyond the grave. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to tear their world apart. But I couldn't let them walk all over me anymore. I wasn't a guest in their home. This was my home. It was time to take it back. I called my lawyer, someone I hadn't needed much before but would need now. I explained the situation in a few hurried words, my voice shaking. He was quiet for a long time before finally speaking. Camilla, this is your house. You have every right to act. I didn't have a plan. I just knew one thing. I wasn't going to run anymore. I was going to make them face the truth. A week later, I found myself standing in front of that house again. It looked different now, though I couldn't say why. Maybe it was the weight of everything that had happened. Maybe it was the fact that it no longer felt like I was walking into someone else's life. It was mine now. The air around me was still and heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. I took a deep breath, fingers tightening around the stack of legal papers in my hand. I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over something. It wasn't a win, not yet, but it was mine. My lawyer, Rob, was standing beside me. He was a quiet man, but he exuded confidence in a way I hadn't yet learned to. His eyes met mine briefly, a small nod of reassurance. I knocked. When Roger answered, he looked older than I remembered, more worn down, like he was carrying a weight he couldn't shake. For a moment, I almost felt bad for him. But then I saw Lily behind him, arms crossed, her eyes narrowing when she saw me. There was a smirk tugging at the corners of her mouth, but it faltered when she saw the papers in my hand. "Camilla," Roger said, his voice low, almost wary. He stepped aside without saying more, like he already knew why I was there. He knew what was coming. I didn't waste time. I handed him the eviction papers. His face went pale as he read the first few lines, his hand shaking just slightly. Lily snatched the papers from him, glaring at me. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice rising. "I believe it's called eviction," I said quietly, watching the color drain from their faces. The tension in the air was thick, a quiet storm brewing just beneath the surface. Roger still hadn't spoken, and Lily's fury only seemed to fuel the growing silence. I could see the shift in them. At first, there was shock. Then that shock turned into disbelief, and then anger. Lily's hands clenched into fists, the papers crinkling in her grip. "You can't do this," she spat, stepping forward, face twisted with rage. "This is our house. You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted, my voice steady but hard, the calmness of the moment almost unnerving. "You might think it's your house, but it's mine now." Roger shifted on his feet, his face pale and strained. His silence was suffocating. He hadn't said a word since I showed up, didn't even try to defend his own daughter. But the moment I met his eyes, I saw the flicker of guilt. He knew it. He knew what he'd done, and now there was no way to take it back. Lily's scream cut through the air like a knife. "You bitch! You think you can just walk in here and take everything from us? You think your mom's stupid little secret gives you the right to tear apart our family?" Her words burned, but they didn't hit me the way she expected. I didn't flinch. "I'm not here to tear anything apart. I'm just here to take what's mine." Her face contorted in a mix of disbelief and fury. Her eyes darted between me and the papers in her hands. "You're a fucking liar. This was our home, and you're not welcome here anymore. I don't care what some papers say." "You care," I said, cutting her off. "And so does he." I turned my gaze to Roger. "You knew, didn't you? You knew what she did. What? She left for me." Roger's lips parted, but nothing came out. His silence screamed louder than any words ever could. I didn't need to say more. The truth was all around us, hanging in the air like a heavy fog. It wasn't about revenge. It was about something they hadn't understood until now. The truth always comes to light, no matter how hard you try to hide it. The house seemed smaller now, suffocated by the noise of their anger. Lily was still standing there, her mouth moving, but no words coming out. Her face was flushed red, as though she might explode at any moment. Roger, on the other hand, had finally found his voice, but it was weak, defensive. "Camilla," he said, stepping forward, his hand raised as though he could stop the inevitable. "You have to understand. We didn't know. Your mother never told us about the deed." "Stop," I cut him off. "Don't make it sound like you didn't know. You knew. You were too busy with your own life to care about me or her." He flinched at the truth, but I wasn't going to let him off the hook. Not anymore. "She trusted you. She trusted you to take care of me, to be my family. And this is how you repay her? By treating me like I don't matter?" Lily let out a bitter laugh, stepping forward to stand beside Roger. "We are your family," she spat, her voice thick with venom. "And you're the one who's been leeching off us all this time. You think this house changes anything? You're just a stranger here. Always were." Her words stung, but I stood taller, more certain than ever. "You never saw me as family. You saw me as a threat to your life here. But that's the thing. You never truly had control. You were always pretending." The truth hit harder than anything I could have expected. Lily's face twisted, her fingers trembling as she crumpled the eviction papers in her hand. "This isn't over," she hissed, backing away. "You won't get away with this. You're nothing." She stormed off, her footsteps echoing through the house as Roger stood motionless, his expression unreadable. It wasn't just the house anymore. It was everything. The family they thought they had control over, the one that was never theirs to break, was slipping through their fingers. And there was nothing they could do to stop it. The silence that followed their departure was overwhelming. The house, which had once felt suffocating, now felt strangely empty. It was quieter than I remembered, almost as if the walls were exhaling after holding their breath for so long. I stood in the doorway, staring at the space I used to call home. But it was different now. It wasn't a place of memories or shared moments. It was a place where I had been forced to fight for my right to exist. I ran my fingers along the doorframe as I walked through the living room, past the same couch where my mother had sat. She had always been here, in these corners, in every little detail of the house. Now, it was just me. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like I had won. But there was a quiet peace settling over me. This was mine. I wasn't a guest. Anymore, I wasn't a shadow in someone else's home. I was the one who mattered now, and that meant something. The first thing I did was sit at my mother's desk, her old wooden chair creaking beneath me as I pulled out the drawers. It smelled like her. like the faint scent of lavender and the paper she used to write her letters. I found a few old bills, a stack of unopened letters, and underneath it all, a small envelope with my name written in her handwriting. My heart skipped as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, her handwriting, in that familiar slanted script. You were always meant to be here. You will always belong. Tears stung at the corners of my eyes. My mother had known. She'd always known. She'd done this for me, not just out of love, but out of protection. She'd made sure I was never alone, even when it felt like the world had forgotten me. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. The weight of the house didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like a promise, one I was finally able to keep. The first few days after they left felt strange, almost like a dream. I wandered through the house, taking stock of everything I had inherited. Not just the property, but all the small moments, the fragments of a life that had once been whole. The air in the rooms was different now. It was lighter. The emptiness that had once weighed me down began to fill with something I couldn't quite name. I was no longer the unwanted guest. I wasn't someone to be dismissed or ignored. This house was mine. The power was mine. And it was the kind of power that didn't shout. It was subtle, quiet. But it was real. I felt it in my bones, in the way the house responded to my presence. It was like the place itself knew I belonged here. As the days passed, I began making small changes. I moved the furniture around in the living room, threw out things that had no meaning to me. I painted the walls in soft colors, letting the rooms breathe again. It wasn't about revenge or rubbing their faces in it. It was about reclaiming what had always been mine. Roger called once, asking if we could talk. His voice was low, almost pleading, but I didn't answer. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to discuss. Lily sent me a message too. A single line. You'll regret this, Camilla. This won't end the way you think. I didn't reply. The truth was, it had ended. It had ended the moment I stepped foot back in this house and took what was mine. The shift was complete. I was no longer fighting for a place at their table. I had my own table now. It's funny how things work out when you stop fighting to make them happen. I'd spent so much of my life trying to fit into a world that never quite saw me, trying to hold on to people who only ever saw me as a burden. I thought I had to prove myself to them, to show them that I deserved a place at their table, that I was worth something. But all along, I had been looking in the wrong direction. The house was quiet now, and for the first time in months, I felt at peace. There was no one here to judge me, no one to remind me I didn't belong. I had learned something in all of this. It wasn't about what they thought of me, what they believed I deserved. It was about who I knew I was. I spent most of my time in the mornings now, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, staring out at the yard. The trees had started to bloom again, and the air smelled sweet with the scent of new life. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. The truth was enough. In the evenings, I'd sit at my mother's desk and read through the letters she'd left behind. Sometimes I'd talk to her, like she was still here, like we were still in the same room. It was comforting. She had always known I was capable of handling this, of standing on my own 2 feet, even when I didn't believe it myself. There were no grand celebrations, no fireworks, no final moments of victory. There was only peace, the kind that comes when you stop fighting and let the truth take over. I didn't need to say a word to anyone anymore. They already knew.